Welcome to this video where we discuss the positives and the pitfalls to buying and building a Thunderhawk, as well as discuss maybe why you should add some toothpaste to your hobby tool collection. So, you've taken the ultimate plunge, you've bought a Thunderhawk for your Space Wolves, and what made you want to do that, really?
Well, I mean, what's not to like about Thunderhawk? It's massive, it doesn't fit on any board you're probably likely to play on. What's not to like? More generally, it was always something I just really liked seeing in the White Dwarf. You know, you'd be flicking through, you know, you're a teenager, you've got no money of your own, you're buying your hobby with your pocket money rather than, you know, adult money. And I always just really liked the look of the thing. I mean, you've seen yourself, there's actually a mock-up, a Chinese Timu knockoff that I tried to make to sort of scratch that itch in relation to some kit bashes I've done. But ultimately, you know, the Thunderhawk was such an iconic kit, such a beautiful looking model that when the opportunity arose, I just felt like I had to sort of make that plunge and treat myself over Christmas, basically.
And there's an amazing, speaking of that kind of like nostalgia almost, there's an amazing Space Wolf diorama in Warhammer world of like the well, not the Thang, but a fortress being overrun by Tyranids. That's got a massive, big old Space Wolf Thunderhawk sort of.
Yeah, it's lovely. It's in the main area, isn't it?
Is it? Yeah,
I've come through before you get to the actual shop bit. Yeah, it's downstairs. It's very nice. I must admit, I did look at it with a certain amount of interest because I'd not purchased it at that point.
No, but I guess you got the sense of the scale for it.
So that, and there's the various models, versions of it throughout the area in Warhammer world. And in the Forge World bit of the shop, they've got them built up but unpainted.
That's cool.
So you get to see the size of the Thunderhawk versus the Stormbird.
Oh, because there was a metal Thunderhawk a million years ago, wasn't there?
Yeah. I'm thinking about this actually when we were talking about obviously arranging to have this chat. I had a quick look, and the metal one you're referring to was about 97.
Right.
And they made 500 of them.
Limited, yeah.
And the came in a big wooden box. I think I seem to recall Squidmar did a video about one that was sold for about 35 grand.
Wow.
So, needless to say, I didn't pay that.
Pretty nice car, that.
Yeah. Well, this is the resin rather than the metal.
Yeah.
I didn't completely lose my mind.
So you can see a bit of the iconic kind of Thunderhawk shape coming together here, which in a lot of ways is almost like someone smashed two Land Raiders together and put some wings and a rhino in there somewhere, probably.
Yep. Imperial design is square and big.
Yeah.
And put as many guns on it as you can. So yeah, it's consistent with the patterns of Mars.
Yeah. Well, if you're having trouble with flying, it's not because your aerodynamics, it's because your engines aren't powerful enough.
Exactly. Not enough thrust.
So we were measuring this thing. It's about 20 inches long, so which is absolutely incredible. It's double the size of almost any other practical miniature you'll see on the tabletop, and it has that standing. But what was your sort of experience? Because a lot of people have complained about this. Any warping, resin? Forge World has a bit of an infamy with things like this.
Well, certainly that was a concern I had. More generally, I think, and this is something that I think people don't do enough of, there is a great deal of benefit to actually building vehicles and the models themselves. The thing with models, especially when you're kit bashing, is it's all about the detail, but it's all very tiny. Whereas with the vehicles, you're obviously dealing with massive pieces, and when it's resin, obviously there's all sorts of problems with it. There was quite a bit of warping.
Wow.
It did spend probably, I think in total I probably spent maybe half an hour to an hour bathing various bits
just to try and bend them back into shape.
Yeah. With so many pieces, you're going to get things that come out of the actual mould that are physically correct, but obviously they bend as they sort of set and cool finally out of the mould. So it's just going to be an inevitability. The problem I think I had, and this is probably another common problem with hobbyists, is like any child that's just got their favourite toy for Christmas, you want to rush and crack on and get everything done. And with plastic models, you can definitely do that. You know, you can pull your Land Raider out, you can chop the bits out.
Yeah, look at the instructions.
You can file it, you know, but obviously people are inherently of the position that they'll do the least amount of effort to get to where they want to be.
Yeah.
So this is why things like mould lines are such a contentious issue. Some people take mould lines off a model, some people don't.
Wow.
And it's a similar thing with resin. That there's lots of steps you have to take in relation to the actual kits themselves. people talk about it on YouTube, and I would agree. You definitely need to be washing it.
Oh yeah, they have
weirdly,
it's like a release resin, isn't it?
Yeah,
or something.
There's essentially an agent that they put in the moulds that will allow them to get the resin out once it's hardened from the mould. But that is, by its nature, very waterproof. It's very water resistant, so then you can't get paint on. So a key takeaway when you're doing anything like this with resin is definitely you need to put some time aside to paint it. To wash the whole thing down. To properly polish it down.
Yeah, I mean, I've only dealt with a few minor resin sort of character models and things like that, and they're very much like they get put in an old Tupperware with some soapy water and scrubbed with a toothbrush and rinsed
Yeah. Well, I had an old electric toothbrush that I used on it, so it saved me a bit of time.
Yeah, definitely.
But weirdly, it's funny you say that about toothbrush. I found the best thing to clean it is actually toothpaste.
Really?
Yeah.
Why is
I think
that?
So. Because it's designed to take foreign objects off a smooth surface, whereas with something like washing up liquid, it's more aimed at separating something from the water. It's hydrophobic, but the toothpaste seemed to have a much better result. It might be the fluoride, I don't know.
That's a top tip. Cover your Thunderhawk in toothpaste. So I remember when I was younger getting a White Dwarf magazine with a Tale of Four Gamers in it. And that had a bit in it where they were judging the painting of the different armies that were being put through this tournament inside the White Dwarf team. And one of the guys got bonus points for painting the interior of his tank. And ever since then, I was like, you know what? You should paint the interior of the tank. It's part of the joy of the model. And with this thing, there's a lot of interior to paint and then seal away in its sarcophagus.
And obviously harder when you've got to realise as well that thing needs cleaning to the degree where it will actually take the paint and keep the paint on it. So yeah, it was one of those once in a lifetime opportunities. You know, how often do you buy something like that and own something like that? So yeah, of course, I was going to settle in and do the whole thing and paint the interior as well, knowing that I'm basically the only person that ever saw one in by way of detail. But as you can see from the pictures, I did go in a go big or go home kind of approach to it. Tried to paint as much of it as I could reasonably.
And is almost the whole hull sort of to scale and equip and there's not.
I mean, there's only essentially, if to look at them all now from where we're sat, from the cockpit to sort of the front of the gun where it lifts up is the compartment you can see there.
Right, and the rest of it's just solid.
And the rest of it's just solid resin, or it's just actual space void. So like the bit at the back of the cannon where the second set of wings lift up, that's basically a void. It's just a shape that you then glue together.
I suppose it would just be an engine or a plasma or a cannon reactor of some kind.
This is it. And whilst I didn't want to go to the extent of kit bashing then the gubbins for the Thunderhawk, obviously I wanted to try sort of enjoy the experience. And this is one of the things about the models. As you know, although the Monkeys do play, I'm more of a builder than I am a table player. So for me, the hobby, although the bit of the hobby I enjoy is the creation of the models and the kit bashing and the pleasure I derive from doing that. So I approached the interior with the same kind of determination that I did with the rest of the model, really, is to try and get a consistent, decent paint job on the interior, which I'll show you later. If I lift the front down, you can actually still see it.
Oh, that's good. I mean, I've got that with a Land Raider, and I do think it's one thing, in an age where people slag off Games Workshop for having holes in the bottoms of models. It is good that stuff like this exists, where they don't need this. No one would not buy this kit because the interior is not accurate. But there's some sculptor absolutely poured their heart and soul into this.
Yeah, that's a couple of weeks' work for somebody out there, isn't it? And how many people actually will take the time to paint it? It's a good question.
So with this obvious behemoth of a vehicle, what was your kind of strategy for managing the project?
Well, obviously once I got through the mountain of toothpaste and electric brush recharging, it's such a big model. I didn't think I'd be able to stick it on my desk, build it in one sitting, and then, not in one sitting, but as a single piece, and then obviously then paint it as a single piece.
Yeah.
So I essentially broke it down into what I would say is sort of three pieces. So you've got essentially the cockpit, which is the bit you're looking at there, and obviously that included the interior. So I essentially spent a bit of time getting rid of the warps in relation to the shape itself, the resin, straightening all that as much as I could. Used that dry fitting it together as I was building the other pieces to make sure that everything lined up. Because with something this big, you're going to get things you have to fill. You're going to get things you're going to have to then backfill and sand down. Yeah. It's just an inevitability given the size of the thing.
What's your preferred material for that?
I like using Milliput and green stuff mixed together.
Oh, we mixed that. Okay, I've heard that. I've heard of that, but I've never done it.
It's good.
Yeah.
You get like a nice light green, but what it does is it gives you the properties of both without any of the weaknesses. So, for example, anyone out there who's thinking about going to kit bashing, green stuff is great for actually moulding because it's very pliable. When you use different portions, you get different results from the material. But the problem with green stuff is once it's hard, it's not strong enough to sand well.
No.
It's still quite plastic.
Yeah.
So what you do is you can't get a straight edge or a hard edge. So if you're looking to put a very faceted piece on a model, you have to do it all in the mould. You can't then go back to it and make it tight with sandpaper,
which is very difficult.
It's sticky. It's not impossible to do, but it's very difficult to do. Whereas Milliput, you can machine that all night and day.
Yeah.
So but Milliput can be quite sort of brittle.
Yes.
It doesn't flex well. So by mixing the two together, you can essentially sort of get the properties of both without any of the weaknesses.
Very nice. I'll have to try that. So what was the sort of painting process for such a large canopy?
Well, obviously you can see the canopy itself. I did that separately because of all the pieces that are in the model, seemingly the canopy is the hardest thing to get a copy of.
Oh.
So if I was to get that bit wrong, I'd be up a certain creek without a paddle. So, as I say, I broke it down to sections, and rather than trying to build everything and then fit it together, then paint everything, it's too big a model. So what I did is I essentially broke it into these 3 or 4 pieces like a puzzle, and then I built those and painted them up as I was going along, and just sort of referenced back to themselves. So you can see there in the picture, you've got essentially the nose cone, you've got the cockpit. And obviously, you've seen from the previous pictures that the interior was obviously already done by this point. So I painted it together, and even at this stage, this was all held together essentially with pins.
Right.
So it wasn't glued at this stage or bonded properly. At this point, what I'd done is I drilled all the pieces where they were going to connect, and I'd used quite long pins so that I could slide it in together
and hold the weight.
So it would. Essentially, the pins would act as a vice to hold the bits in place. So I could line things up, I could work out what needed shaving down, what was useful, what needed to be tweaked or sort of, further messed with before I could then go in with the paint. So at this point, I've essentially rough fit the model together, I've pinned the pieces, and so it can stand by itself, and at that point, I've started to apply the paint to the sections.
You can actually see where the paint goes on, yeah.
Yeah.
Because this sort of Space Wolves, it's kind of like you've got a nice mix of that kind of blue-grey, the yellow. What's the recipe for the yellow?
I actually have got some acrylic paints that I mix. They're not Citadel ones. I can show you at the end, but essentially it's an orange.
Yes,
up into the yellow. So what I would do is, if you think of it like a magma blade, you start with the lowest tone, and then you work up to the colour.
Yeah.
A bit like some people sort of ascribe to painting Templars not in black but in grey.
Yes.
And you use the black as the contrast.
Yeah.
It's a similar thing. So I'm using the yellow as the accent to the actual tone of the whole painting.
Because things like contrast paints and washes just don't take on these like massive surfaces, do they?
No, it's difficult to do. Yeah.
So you've got these 2 little tech marine guys in the front, right? Which I think Space Wolves, do they still send their guys to Mars, or do they have like a kind of an iron forge kind of thing?
Well, I think they have to go to Mars as a result, but I think the Space Wolves' approach to mechanics is a bit like dwarves. They just hit things with a hammer until it works. But yeah, you've got obviously the 2 models there now. They are essentially firstborn in size because obviously the kit's quite old. And as you can see, I've thrown some other pieces on them to give them more of a Space Wolves flavour, with different heads and different sort of shoulder pads and what have you.
Big beards.
Yeah, exactly. To keep it nice and authentic. But they as a piece of the kit, they do look quite small compared to a normal Marine. It's quite interesting.
Yeah, I always think that about like the guys that stick out the top of rhinos are sometimes a little.
And it's the same with the attack bikes.
Yeah.
From the older editions.
Yeah, the legs are
the little gunner always looked smaller than a normal Marine.
Yeah, except for the massive shoulder pads.
Yeah. I mean, amusingly, they don't have power packs on either. No. So I don't know what happens if they're ever to crash.
Yeah, I presume they're supposed to be stowed somewhere. Like maybe they're under the seats, like your life jacket.
Yeah. But at the minute, I assume they're plugged into the ship writ large,
yeah,
and that's where they get the power
I think they're
from.
supposed to like sort of commune with the machine spirit as much as drive the damn thing, aren't they?
Yeah. But I mean, to give you the scale, a rhino is probably about the size of the actual bit of the ship you can see on the photo.
Yeah.
It's a very, very, very small piece.
Yeah.
Compared to the volume that the whole thing is.
Yeah, you almost feel like you should be able to transport tanks in this thing.
Definitely.
So this is the wings. This is like the sort of central part of the model, I suppose. Well, more towards the back, but it's the middle in a lot of ways.
It's the gubbins, as I said earlier.
Exactly. And how does this go together? How many pieces of resin are on the screen here?
Very difficult. There is, I think, 4 pieces in total. You've got a wing either side. That's one complete piece.
Right.
Bottom and back. So the underside and the whole thing is one massive block.
Oh.
So if that thing, for any reason, is twisted,
you're in trouble.
It's very difficult to correct. And then you've got essentially a carriage at the bottom, and you've got the bit at the top that shunts together with a little overhang lip, like an L-shaped lip, which I think you can just see on the picture.
Yeah.
And obviously that's the void I was talking about. It's just a gap in the middle. And then the other bits, that, like the gun and the extra wings, essentially accessorise on the top. But yeah, that was probably one of the trickier parts of the build. It was, how do I attach what is very heavy resin to the actual base itself? A normal pin, like if you get a paper clip, most people pin with paper clips. If you get a paper clip and pin it that way, you're going to really struggle to do it. In the end, I did a combination of sort of 2 or 3 things. I used copper rod rather than a paper clip, and I essentially used them as staples. So I drilled a hole into the wing and then put the hole on the corresponding side of the body, and then at that side I then bent the copper up inside the hole.
I see.
So it kind of hooks onto the actual resin itself, and then a combination of sealing that in and sort of using glue to fill the gap to bond it together.
Yeah, I mean it's worth spending the time on for a model like this. The last thing you want is it disintegrating in your arms as you weep.
Most definitely.
So this is more of it sort of coming together, and I mean, having held this thing, it's a weighty beast, and I guess that's a lot of the problem. Like beyond it just being resin, and do you ever have? I'd like to ask if the resin you ever feel at risk of it like sort of snapping and breaking when you're working with it?
No, I've lifted it, caught the wing on something, and pulled the wing off more than one occasion.
Okay.
You only do that once or twice. Won't do it again, given the cost of the wing.
Yes.
Anyone have to try and fix that. But no, I think the problem, as you said, is that the adhesives, like that we use, super glue, things like that, are very much designed to hold things together. They have much less inertia when they're moving, and the bond of that super glue onto that resin just isn't strong enough to hold it. Even if you score each side of it, it will just break off, and it did. Which is why I went to such extreme lengths with that hook into the body itself and lock it into place.
Almost using its own weight against itself in a way.
That's it. And I mean, as you look at it there on the over there on the display, it's actually stood, but it's still not yet one piece of a model. The front canopy and the back end are still separate. They're just held together at the minute with a staple that I've made in the top, and I'm still deciding what I want to do by way of attaching that. It's a big issue. There's a lot of weight on both sides. So super glue isn't going to hold it.
And do you think, I mean, in some ways, is it perhaps for the stability of the whole thing, is it maybe better to leave it?
Yeah. I'm also thinking about, as we've discussed, I mean, I don't necessarily play. A lot of these models are for display, so it can sit there quite happily in there, but if at any point we want to do something with it up at the cave, it needs to be easily transportable. So I am thinking about having it remaining as 2 halves.
Yeah, even if it's a bit more secure than just the current staple.
Yeah, until I have to move it.
So here it is on the painting desk, all together. An absolute sort of beast of a thing, and there's a lot of, like, obviously we saw the pictures of the canopy coming together, but then there's a lot of bits beyond that.
Yeah. Something like 12 thrusters that go along the bottom that you'll probably never see.
No.
And if you were to go look at this on the internet, because I did a chunk of research just about how people have attacked this paint schemes, what they've done. The heresy ones actually look really good for the wolves. They're mostly just sort of the grey with the red. So I tried to bring some of those older traditions in, but obviously keeping it a bit more contemporary with what they usually do with the painting. But yeah, 12 thrusters that you'll never see painted. Had to sand down. There was a good deal of work. Not as much as obviously putting the thing together, but certainly a couple of days worth of just working out what piece went where and why and how.
Yeah, and there's so many like bits to it for sure. So you've got these kind of I guess in a maze. You said it was just the way that the plastic came.
Yeah.
But it almost does look like they've got frost over the front of this thing. And
it's a happy coincidence that it's where it is.
Yes.
But yeah, it is just an artifact of the material. There's a couple of bits, and you can't see it on the other window on the side, but there's actually a whitening on the plastic as well, where just the mould's obviously not taken quite right. But you can barely tell. It's not out of shape, but it is discoloured.
Yeah. I suppose as well as a sort of a weird quirk of it being that imperial architecture, this thing doesn't have any windscreen wipers of any capacity, does it? Like the gargoyle gets pasted across there. Those guys are flying blind.
Well, I'm assuming they're travelling so fast they don't need to worry about wiping the windows down.
I suppose everything's just obliterated.
Yeah, exactly. That's it.
Yeah.
But there's one thing that's interesting about the model itself, and you'll see those little tiny wings. I must have broken them about 4 times.
Oh God, yeah.
When I was moving it around, I'd catch it on something and tear it off. The big wings obviously were harder to take off, but those little ones on the side were much harder to do. But they're a good example of making sure that you do your preparation. Because as you might expect, as you get further along, like a kid writing an essay, as you get close to the end, you want to skip a couple of bits and get on with it. And so there's bits where I probably could really, if I was being honest, go back, strip it, give it another proper clean down, because the paint will probably over time come off in areas.
Probably those little bits that you were like, you just give them a quick scrub.
Yeah,
got your Colgate on them and then gone.
Yeah, didn't do as much as I should.
So you're talking about all those engines. So you reckon, I mean, there's a dozen engines just up, lifting it up, pushing it along.
Yeah.
It's just like, I can't imagine how the controls of this thing work even slightly. Like, I'm sure from a logistics standpoint it simply would not work, but the engines are the future tech.
Yeah, it's a giant brick, isn't it? Let's be fair. I mean, it's a sexy looking brick, but it is still a brick. But yeah, the like everything with the Imperial, isn't it? It's brute force. It's
just more.
It's not make it elegant or smooth like a Eldar or a Mazda. No. It's going to be a brick, like an American sort of 60s muscle car. Is the way they think they do it, and like I say, make up for it with brute power. But you can see obviously at the back there, you can see the gubbins, you can see the air brakes, which do work actually.
Oh, wow.
You can lift them and pull them out, so you can deploy them or you can put them down.
That's cool. I'd assumed that they would just be sealed down, but that's a nice touch.
Well, I think because they are sort of fragile in the mechanism, they're attached by essentially a lock. But that would be easy to take off. And as I say, I can see why people might glue it down, having broken several bits off it as I was building it anyway.
So we're looking at the sort of different guns that are just strapped to this thing. Like any good Space Marine vehicle, it is just armed to the teeth. You've got the turbo laser destroyer on the top, which is just really cool. How do you aim that thing?
Quickly.
Yeah.
Given that you're travelling at speed, not get hit, I would imagine you do it quickly or from a long way away and work your way down.
And the Hellstrike missile battery, which, the fire flying off from under those wings.
Yeah. There's assault cannons as well under there, which I don't think you can see from that photo. And then of course you've got those last cannons on the wingtips, the extra wingtips.
Which again you somehow aim, I suppose, like a World War I pilot.
Yeah, the bit that makes me laugh is those last cannons look like basically just the Long Fang or the Devastator Squad ones. They seem weirdly puny compared to everything else on it. I
mean it's got its cannons, it's heavy bolt, and it's got heavy bolters, which I think are sort of for covering the front doors, aren't they, for the guys deploying out the front.
Yeah, definitely.
But I mean it's a 840 point unit that you can fit 30 Space Marines in. So I I do think you could maybe get a whole army inside this thing.
Yeah, I've probably only got about 30 Space Marines, to be fair.
Yeah, you could probably get it, just everyone.
Take my whole army and make a little gunship up. Little gunship.
It's a great concept for sure. Just, so it's the deployment phase.
Yeah.
I'm done.
Yeah, all mine are coming on in vehicle.
Yeah. So I really do like this shot. It almost looks like a kind of arid planet that the Thunderhawks set down on. Or the Thunderwolves panting from being overheated as they come clambering out.
Hiding in the shade underneath.
Yeah. And it's just great, this kind of scale of this thing. Do you have any kind of ideas for what you might use it for?
Well, we've got a couple of people in the Monkeys that like to do the sort of scenic stuff.
Definitely.
Obviously, Tim takes those great photos with his with his big SLR camera. So I imagine at some point it will make an appearance up in the cave, and we'll be able to dress it up in some pretty surroundings. For me, when I was building it, I kind of imagined my Lehman Russ coming out of the front of that. I mean, obviously I can't play it in 40k yet. But it would be nice to see Lehman Russ kind of coming down the old ramp with the wolves, sort of his Thunderwolves running either side of it. That'd be pretty cool.
Yeah.
Or just sat, like I say, as part, almost like you see those pictures from World War II pilots, and they've got the plane behind them, and then the pilots in front of it. Like a Lancaster bomber and the squadrons in front of it. Yeah. So I kind of imagine that as well. You know, a load of Marines stood in front of their Thunderhawk. That'd be pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, there could be some great narrative opportunities as well for, like, you know, you have just you can almost like make a team out of what can physically fit in a Thunderhawk, and then they have to complete a series of missions deploying out the Thunderhawk.
That'd be cool. Almost like a sort of, like I say, a role play saga. Where you do 3 or 4 small sort of kill team almost games.
You can't like replace your casualties in a lot of ways. It'd be very fun.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
Especially with the Crusade rules, them all getting battle scars and things like that.
Yeah, definitely. That's my bag.
Yeah, it just very much speaks to that kind of narrative of this. Because it's a model and a piece of scenery at the same time to me.
It's certainly big enough. I mean, look at it. It's huge.
Yeah, use it as a L-shaped ruin.
Exactly. Yeah.
So final shot here of the Thunderhawk on its landing pad for now. Do you have any kind of final thoughts, reflections on the project? Are you happy with how it turned out?
Yeah, overall, pretty pleased with it. I mean, I got it at Christmas and I finished it first week in February.
That's good going.
I threw most of my free time at it.
How could you not?
Yeah, exactly. There's a couple of things I think I would suggest to people who are thinking about perhaps potentially going to more complicated models. Doesn't have to be a Thunderhawk. I'm not suggesting you blow a load of money on it, but let's say you've never bought a tank before, or you've only ever used plastic and you're looking to maybe get a kit that's resin and it's kind of putting you off. There's a couple of things that I think are really useful to bear in mind. First thing is, obviously you want to dry fit it as much as you can. It's not going to fit. Just be prepared for that. You're going to get bits that are bent. You're going to get things that don't line up. You're going to panic. I know certainly when I first got my Lehman Russ, the sword was like a bloody umbrella. It was absolutely bent over, which terrified me until I realised that you could obviously reheat the resin and mould that back into shape.
Weird, isn't it?
So there's going to be obstacles you'll have to overcome, and that's the bit that's interesting from a learning perspective. There's lots of little things I learned building this kit that I wouldn't have known had I not taken on such a big job. But that can be true for a smaller model, you know.
Yeah, and you've definitely built up to this as Land Raiders and all sorts of kit bashed, like true. You know, you've upscaled the Predator and things like that into like repulsor size. So but this is, I guess, is this the peak? Are you going to?
I think so.
Yeah.
I don't know if I have space for anything bigger.
No.
I mean, I've got space in the room, but the cabinet it's in, is going to struggle to get anything bigger. I mean, I might like to make something like a Warhound. I don't know I'd want to own one. I don't know. I mean, they're a beautiful model, and the one that the cave's got was nice. And to some extent, it's Carl's fault that even exists, my Thunderhawk.
Oh yeah.
Because when I was fixing the Warhound, gave me a bit of an itch for something a bit bigger in relation to what I was building. But no, I'd like to have a play with one, build another model like that. But I don't know if I'll own anything else quite as big as that.
No, see, for me, the Thunderhawk, there's very much, and not just the Thunderhawk, but any of these kind of big Forge World models. I'm not the best at the hobby side of things. I do try and I enjoy it. Like I like to think I try all the facets of it. But for me, it's not so much that I don't think I'd be able to do a project like this, but I'm irked by the fact that you pay a premium for things that
don't fit.
Yeah, it really. I don't know. It's like a mental thing.
Yep. I understand. I understand. I mean, like I said, the when I was doing this one, the front half, so where you see essentially the canopy back to where the start of the gun bit, so it dips down.
Yes,
that's all one piece.
Right.
But the bottom and the top didn't line up.
Jeez, right.
So there's an L shape inside, so it sits on it in a lip.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah, and so it's supposed to sit together and sort of mesh together. But the bit that was at the top was too big for the bit at the bottom.
So you almost had to like crush the top bit to make it fit.
So I had to warm the entirety of that top fuselage up
in like a big tub.
In a tub of water, and then and of course bending it that way creates warps elsewhere.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of kind of just subtle changes as I got it closer and closer to where I needed it to be. And then a lot of shaving to then get that in where I thought I couldn't really bend it any further.
And is that a bit of a challenge you enjoy, that kind of style and like looking at?
I think if you enjoy this part of the hobby, that's the sort of pinnacle of the work.
Yeah.
It's, can I make this model become what it's supposed to be?
Yeah.
And is there going to be, is it going to be recognisable? Am I going to essentially blow it?
Yeah, because I mean you've got all those lumps of resin that still have those like chocks attached to them that you have to saw off. And
I mean there was something like 300 pieces to it.
Yeah.
It's absolutely
incredible.
Massive amount of bits you have to then work through yourself manually. But I would say anyone looking to do it, it is rewarding. Be prepared for there to be things that you don't expect along the way. But persevere, and like you say, things like milliput and green stuff cover all manner of sins.
Especially once you put that first spray over it.
It all goes away.
Yeah.
Magically goes away. But it's definitely worth doing. I would advise anyone who's looking to maybe get a bigger kit to certainly look at it. Do some reading around. One of the things I did before I got this is I spent a chunk of time reading on and watching videos on YouTube about people who have built in the past where they thought there were problems. And I suppose in some regard I'm hoping that this is me adding back
into
the work already done. But definitely do it. Be prepared to do a whole lot of prep work on the model. Don't be surprised when it doesn't fit the way you expect it to. It's going to be a different shape to the actual intention, and just not to panic when you see that sort of thing. Think through it and work a way around the problem to get to where you need to be. That's what I say.
And cover it in toothpaste.
Cover it in toothpaste.
So thanks for watching, everyone. Like and subscribe if you enjoyed this type of content. We'll hopefully make some more about some of the other cool minis we've got hanging around at the cave. And bye.